today, my hope is to make a holiday favorite from a very different cultural group. Growing up, I spent many winters with friends in Mexico, spending a month or more each year with my family, exploring that country and learning about their culture. As well, of course, I had a Colombian congregation in my church in Kitchener, and so grew to really love the flavors of Latin food, and at all special times of the year. It was important to make enchiladas. I love enchiladas, and they're really quite a simple food. Now, I know that if you looked it up online, they would tell you to just go to the store and buy regular wheat flour tortillas. First of all, for me as a celiac, I can't have those wheat flour tortillas. But also, if you want a truly authentic Latin taste, you're not going to use wheat flour tortillas. Go to your local grocery store and pick up a bag of maseca, which is readily available, and it is the basic corn flour that is used in every Latin household. Now we're going to begin making our homemade tortillas with 2 cups of maseca. It's a really simple recipe to make corn flour tortillas. Moment here. And I'm going to add a 1.5 cups of just plain water into the mix. Of course, I'll end up spilling some all over the place, but okay. So with the dough hook installed, you need to beat that batter or that dough together for at least 2 minutes in order to get what we want. And if after 2 minutes it still seems a little too dry to work with, then we will take some time adding just a teaspoon at a time, because the last thing you want is for it to become too wet. I'm just going to use this knife to free the stuff from the edge of the bowl to make sure that everything gets well mixed in. It's already really looking like the dough that I want, but I'll give it its full 2 minutes. You'll get a much better product that way. Just wipe up the water I spilled. For the next stage, no self-respecting Latin house would be without one of these, a tortilla press. If you don't have one, it's not a problem. You can place the same ball of tortilla dough between 2 pieces of parchment and use your good old-fashioned rolling pin. You maybe won't get such a perfectly round tortilla, but I'm not certain that that's such an important issue. This is really beginning to work like I want it to. Let's give it maybe 1 more minute. Loose the stuff from the edges again. Now, as part of this show as well, I'm going to teach you how to make a traditional enchilada sauce. I think pretty well every family, every Latin family is going to give you a different recipe for that. This is the one that I was taught. I like it a lot. Now I'm going to do it on a very low spice level, to be honest with you, because my wife is pretty much a wimp. If I were making it just for myself, I would likely add in a whole jalapeno, and then when it was all prepared, use my plunge blender in order to get it to be really nice and smooth. So I think we've had 2 minutes here. So I want to form my dough together into a nice big ball. So we have a nice ball. Now we're going to cut that ball into 24 pieces. Now, I'm not certain that I really need 24 tortillas, but cut it into 4 at this point. Half. Would be the equivalent of 8. So far I've managed to make 12 roughly even pieces of tortilla dough. I'm going to round them out into a nice round ball, place it on a piece of parchment inside of the tortilla press. I'll put a second piece of parchment and just squash it down enough to keep everything together where it should be. Close the lid, bring down the handle. My tortilla press is getting a little loose with age, so I sometimes have to press a couple times. There's my first tortilla ready for cooking. These tortillas are going to be a little small. You can perhaps cut the dough down into less balls and get a larger tortilla, but this size works pretty well for me. And 2, and I'll just lay them flat there, one on top of another, until I'm prepared to fry them up. Oh, don't forget the parchment. I'm only going to press out 12 because I really think that 12 will be enough to fill my casserole dish and enough to make a nice meal for Becky and I without having a truckload of leftovers to eat through the week. And wrapped in cellophane, that tortilla dough will last in my fridge for several days, and I can use it for other forms of Latin food that I decide that I'd like to make. And in my household, we end up eating sort of Mexican food on a pretty regular basis because I love it so much. Well, now for a napkin fold this week, I want to make the Greek cross as we move closer to Holy Week and to that celebration of the cross. This is a very simple napkin fold, but it makes a beautiful presentation on a plate for setting a lovely Easter or Holy Week meal. So I'm going to set the finished one aside and demonstrate how to make the whole thing. So we will take, in this case I'm folding with a paper napkin, simply because making this with a cloth napkin really requires an iron, and I didn't want to have to bring my iron over to the church as well. So we're going to open the napkin up fully. Into that 16-inch square, flatten it out well, and then begin by folding it in half diagonally. Crease that really well, and then we'll open it back up again. Now we'll take the bottom corner and fold it up to the center of the square. Turn it around and do the same with the opposite corner. Crease those folds well, and then turn it and fold in the remaining two corners. When you have all four corners folded in, we're going to take it and turn it upside down. And begin again to do the same thing, folding each of the four corners up to the center point. And again, when we have all four corners folded up, we're going to turn it upside down, and you'll get something that looks like this, with a cross in the center. And one more time, we're going to fold each of the corners up to the center point. And there we have it. It's ready for the last stage, which is to reach inside of each of these. Wait, flip it over. Reach inside each of the flaps, folding out the edges to create each of the transepts of our cross. Then we'll flip it again, and we have created our Greek cross. Now, because my theology of the cross says that even on Good Friday, even at that darkest moment of the cross, this remains the symbol of our deepest and greatest hope. I always put a simple flower at the center of the cross before I place it on the table, just as a reminder that in that darkest of all moments, God was working the greatest of all hope. So now the next stage in our process is to prepare each of these tortillas. They're now just flattened dough, and we want a fairly flat pan. This one being non-stick is really quite helpful. Certainly I remember 50 years ago, the first time I saw the ladies in Mexico creating their tortillas, they were not working with the kind of equipment I get to use today. And I would see them out gathered over a fire in their front lawn with a steel pan over that fire where they had no control over the temperature or much of anything else. I've got this set just a tiny bit above medium, and we will just give it an opportunity to just get nice and golden brown on that side, and then we'll flip it. Just running some dishwater in the background. This first one was made with the very last of the dough that I had, and so it's a little misshapen, but they're all going to taste wonderful when we get them put together. I took the last of that dough that I had and formed it into some that were slightly larger. I'm going to turn it up to medium-high. mainly because I'm not the most patient person you're ever going to find. Once we've got these done, I'm going to show you how to do my version of enchilada sauce. As I said, it's one of those things that every Hispanic house is going to have at least a slightly different recipe for how it should be done right. Well, that's a little early to turn it. It was just beginning to cook through. I think that's enough water. This is an interesting flipper I've got here. I didn't think to bring one with me as I was preparing all the things I would need to do this show today. I see a little bit of smoking coming up from this, which is always a good sign. Oh, I've broken that one, actually, by being impatient. It'll still be fine, but it's not ready. I wonder if in the utensil drawer here, there might be, yes, there is a flipper. That will make my job infinitely easier. The lovely thing about this is you can make your tortillas in advance, and as long as you wrap them well in cellophane and refrigerate them, they can actually last in the fridge for about a week. So, you know, this doesn't all have to be done in one day. You'll see there that I'm beginning to get that lovely bit of golden brown spots and flecks onto the tortilla. Now, in the average Mexican house, they would have used a larger tortilla press in order to get some really big tortillas. I think I'm happier to make smaller enchiladas and place more of them in the casserole dish. My wife and I don't have the appetite that we once had, and it just seems wasteful to have them set up in such a way that there's too much food to go on our plates. Okay, our first one is looking really good. I'm only going to cook a couple of them on camera, and then I'll finish the rest and edit it out. I've now nicely got the pan up to temperature, so the second one shouldn't take as long as the first one did. This is absolutely a dry pan. I've used no stick just so we don't have any accidents, but this particular recipe does not generally stick. It simply toasts. There, I'm smelling a little bit of toasting now. There, that's looking just perfect. There was a time when I would have easily eaten 4 of the large size enchiladas and called that my dinner, but as I say, I don't have the appetite that I once had, and it seems really wasteful. 2 of these smaller ones will way more than satisfy my appetite now. The filling for a standard enchilada, as you would get on a fiesta day in any Mexican household, is very, very simple. The important part is the toppings you place on it after they've been cooked. These are really, really turning out well. I'm pleased with them. Well, in the way of a theological reflection today, I got thinking about this season of Lent that we're in. I looked at my iWatch and I see that tonight the sun will set at 7:42. What glorious news for a person like myself. The days are growing longer as we are brought back to the reminder that in the season of Lent, the season of lengthening, we're preparing for the Easter assurance that life wins, that light wins, that love wins all the time. But like many in the world around us today, I sometimes have a struggle with the fact that Lent, like Advent, is a season of waiting patiently. Patiently waiting has never really been my strength. But we have to be ready to sit and to wait upon God and God's plan for us. God is working out salvation. God is bringing us along on that walk, and as difficult as a season of waiting is, we are also blessed to know what the end result is. And so, as we continue these last couple weeks of patiently waiting, of walking the road that leads to the cross, the road that leads through the cross to the empty tomb, let us be patient in our waiting, not trying to run headlong into Easter, but taking the time to hear the story of the Passion and to appreciate the incredible love that's embodied in the life of Christ through that Passion. I'll just do a shameless plug about patiently waiting and remind everyone that I'll be doing a talk on Thursday at 2 via Zoom about the Passion and what the original authors meant for us to hear in the story of the Passion. And I hope that you'll be able to come and join me by Zoom. If you're unable to come Thursday at 2, I will be posting that Zoom broadcast to this YouTube channel for those who would like to catch it later on. Well, now we're prepared to make our Enchilada sauce. And the first thing I'm going to do over high-medium heat is melt a couple tablespoons of butter. If you're a little conscious about the overuse of butter, something that's never been a big number for me, you can use olive oil or any vegetable oil. But again, if you want that authentic flavor as it would be coming from Mexico, you cannot beat having real butter as the base of your enchilada sauce. And once we have this nicely liquefied, we're going to add approximately 4 cloves of minced garlic in and saute it in order to get a really good flavor base. It's clear I'm running later than I usually would be as the circle of friends are starting to gather out in the hall, and usually I'm all done recording by then. So I'm going to have to move along. That butter is almost ready, so I'm going to add in approximately the equivalent of 4 cloves of garlic minced. And just mix it into the butter in order to get that flavor infused in everything we're going to do following that. So we'll just let it kind of cook away there for a couple of minutes. We'll get a nice golden color and we'll get all that flavor into our enchilada sauce. Spoons. Now I need 2 tablespoons of chili powder. Add it into our butter mixture as it continues to saute the garlic. Just give that a bit of a mix. Oh, now that's already starting to smell like authentic Mexico. No, unfortunately. Don't worry. And now I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of dried oregano. And the beauty of this oregano is it came from John and Pat Dix's garden. There we are. Oh boy, is this smelling wonderful. Now we need 2 teaspoons of ground cumin. Again, if you really want a genuine Mexican flavor, you cannot cook without cumin. And 2 teaspoons of onion powder. I'm going to turn this down because it's getting a little sticky on the bottom. I don't want that. Now it calls for adding salt and pepper. Now I usually add that at the very end. And now I'm going to add a half a cup of chicken broth. I use the Kitchen Basics one because it's guaranteed gluten-free. And I don't want to spend the rest of the afternoon in pain for having enjoyed a couple of good enchiladas. Of course, in my growing up days in Mexico, it would not have really been a problem because the chicken broth, much like is usually the case in my own home, would have been made with the bones of the most recent chicken through the house. So now we're going to add 2 cans of tomato sauce. And that is it. We're going to bring that up to a nice boil, and we will have a very, very authentic Mexican. I'm going to get a better thing to stir with than this fork. Tell you the truth. We will have a very, very authentic looking and tasting Mexican enchilada sauce. I know that Karen just went to lots of trouble to clean up this kitchen, so I've got to make sure that I don't leave any little spatter marks all over. Flavor is just perfect. So once we've brought that to a boil, it makes a lot, and usually way more than I need. And so what I do is I simply can it up as I would any of my summer canning, so that I have some around the house when I'm wanting to make some more enchiladas. As you can see, it's an extremely simple sauce, and is the absolute basis of this whole recipe. Oh, you know, I noticed it would likely get up to heat a lot sooner if I had bothered to turn it back on after I turned it down. Right, so now we're ready for the final phase of assembling the enchiladas. And the first thing that you do, you take one of the tortillas and soak both sides in the enchilada sauce. We bring that wet tortilla over here, and a staple in just about every cultural food in the world, you're going to find some form or other of beans. Certainly within my family, every time a holiday is coming up, I will hear from my nieces and nephews asking that I make for them my homemade molasses beans, our North American version of beans. Here we are going to start with a base of frijoles, which is also known in English as refried beans, made with either pinto or black beans mashed together. Then we're going to follow that with a layer of shredded chicken breast and then some Tex-Mex cheese. And finally, we will roll the tortilla to create a little chicken, bean, and cheese cigar. I may have gotten a little too much into a tortilla of that size. It doesn't want to stay. I may have to go and get a toothpick until I get a few more of these created. I had a toothpick. There they are. That should hold it together long enough for me to get a couple more into the dish, which will then hold them together. Once they've been dipped in the enchilada sauce, they become very slippery. Put that one in there. We'll get a little bit of frijol. That one just does not want to cooperate with me no matter what I do. Again, some shredded chicken, some shredded cheese. Of course, I'm using Tex-Mex cheese so that we bring out those flavors of Mexico even more. That one's a little small to wrap all the way around too, but again, a toothpick will keep it where I want it until I'm ready. And another. And of course, what we find with this sort of food is the contents of the actual enchilada are fairly plain and simple, as with a lot of staple foods from all over the world. What makes them really good are the toppings that you choose to put on top. I'm going to wash up before I make the next one. Finish where I left it. I'm the worst for carrying away my tea towel and then putting it somewhere, can't remember where. And so, let's soak another one. Lay it in there. Once again, I don't think that you need to watch me make all of these. I will finish off camera, but you've gotten the gist of what I'm going to do. When we've made all of these into these beautiful little stuffed tortillas, then we're going to take the whole casserole and we'll sprinkle it with more of our cheese mix, which is a Tex-Mex cheese. And as a result, as the casserole bakes, it's just going to have this beautiful coating of cheese on its top. I think I can remove those toothpicks now because they're wedged in tight enough that they aren't going anywhere. Now, I'll be able to put a couple more down this side, and then we'll put that first coating of cheese on top of the whole thing, and I'll make the second coating without you needing to watch from home. And I'll bake it at 350 until everything is nicely melted and a little bit golden brown. I won't be able to do that on camera today, but I'm sure that that's another one of those things that you can quite well handle doing on your own at home. So one or two more will fill the bottom. It doesn't matter how many layers you put into the casserole, just make sure that you put a good layer of cheese in between them and bake it until all the cheese is melted and the cheese on the very top is beginning to toast a little bit with a bit of golden color. think I want to make, well, they're going to be smaller ones this time because these are from the smaller tortillas, so I might have to make 3 more in order to finish this layer. I've always found that the smaller tortillas work a little bit better, except that I get a little carried away with the amount of stuff I put inside of them, and then there's just not enough tortilla to go around. So I'm going to be careful this time not to overdo it. Just a tiny bit of shredded chicken, a little shredded cheese, fold it up, and it worked just as it's supposed to. Well, wonders never cease. I think 1 more is going to be enough. Once again, dip it in the enchilada sauce, bring it over here. Now, because I like mine to be a little extra juicy, before I put them into the oven, I'm going to put maybe a 1/2 cup of extra enchilada sauce over the top of the whole casserole, so that there's lots of those flavors, because otherwise the enchiladas themselves don't really have a lot of really Mexican flavor to them. So I'll just wash my hands 1 more time so I'm not messing up all my other equipment. And I'll take about a 1/2 cup of that beautiful enchilada sauce and drizzle it over the top. I think I'm actually going to put another 1/2 cup on there. Drop that in the sink. And I'll sprinkle the whole thing, as I said, with some Tex-Mex cheese. Maybe a little more cheese. I really like cheese. As I said, I'll finish off the last of the tortillas into the casserole dish. I don't think you need to see all of that. This, as a single layer, would be just perfect to put into the oven as a meal for 2 or perhaps 3 people. But I'm going to finish the whole